So I've written and talked a lot about how music production and production quality is a really critical component to getting your music licensed. It's huge because if a music supervisor hears a track that you submit and your music production isn't good enough, your track won't even be listened to. It's simply the production has to be good enough. It has to be what's considered quote unquote broadcast quality in order to be licensed. For this program, music production and how to produce your tracks is really beyond the scope of this program. I've done actually two courses dedicated just solely to the topic of music production and mastering your music, specifically for licensing. So if you haven't already checked out those courses, I would encourage you to do so. But what I want to talk about in the context of this program is developing what I call a production strategy. In other words, developing a system where you can consistently create and produce tracks that are good enough to be licensed. And there's a few different ways to go about this. Obviously, if you have your own home studio, if you have sufficient gear and you know how to produce your music and you know how to produce it well, uh, this is a great strategy. This is a great approach. I'm not a great music producer. I like I said before, I really look at music production as its own sort of full-time endeavor, and it's a very different skill than songwriting, and it's a very different skill than publishing music for that matter. So what I do, what works really good for me, what I've been doing for the last couple years now, is producing my tracks in either my own home studio or a friend's home studio, and then having those tracks mixed and mastered by by someone on the back end. So this is a much more affordable way to go about, as opposed to going into like $100 an hour studio and tracking and mixing and mastering everything. Recording costs can get very expensive very quickly, as I'm sure you know. So if you're approaching licensing your music as a business, if you really want to make money doing this, you really have to be careful about your upfront costs, because every time you record a song, there's really no guarantee that that song is actually going to be licensed. So as they say, it takes money to make money, and you definitely have to invest in this like you would any other business. But I think it's really important to be smart about this and really think about on a long-term basis how you're going to actually record and produce your tracks. So again, if you're listening to this and you're already a home studio owner and you know music production, then this section doesn't necessarily apply to you. But if you're like me and you're more of a songwriter or a guitar player and music production isn't necessarily something you excel at, I really would encourage you to find somebody like Gary Gray, who I create courses with on music production and who I collaborate with. I use him as my producer. I would encourage you to find somebody like that who can get your tracks to the level they need to be. I've posted on my website in the past before and after versions of songs that I've just tracked prior to sending to Gary to have mixed and mastered. And the difference before and after is really remarkable. And finding someone like that is priceless. It's really valuable. And so again, there's a lot of different people out there doing music production. If you want to hook up with Gary, that's cool. I'm not, whoever you find, it's the point is you really need to find someone who can help you get your tracks to the level that they need to be if you're not able to do that yourself. So if you're submitting a lot of music and you're not getting accepted into a lot of places and you're not getting your music licensed, I would encourage you to really look at your music production and really determine as objectively as possible if your music is actually, if it's really competitive, if it's really as good as a lot of the music that is being licensed. If it is, great. This isn't an issue, but I think this is an issue for a lot of writers. So that's my approach. I hope that advice helps you. But again, one way or the other, develop a strategy going forward where you can consistently write and produce music that can be licensed.